So much energy in modern day dating goes into finding one man that you're compatible with. So when you finally find that rare gem of a man and then the relationship goes wrong, it can feel devastating. And starting from scratch with someone new can just feel hopeless. In this video, I'm going to arm you with the part of relationships working out that is fully in your control. And if you want to feel like you have options in dating for marriage or life partnership, so you can build the healthiest relationship you've ever been in, that will last as a certainty. This video is going to tell you exactly how to become the woman that does that. This isn't about mindset or belief systems or dating strategies. It's about the tangible actions that you need to do as a must if you are to get the healthier relationship you actually deserve, which you do deserve. So let's jump in immediately. There's IQ, which is your mind intelligence, and there's EQ, which is your emotional intelligence. And you have both of those already. You've nailed those, right? So what we're talking about today is a third thing called emotional skills. And emotional skills are something you're not inherently born with. And a bit like IQ, emotional skills can be taught. And a little bit like EQ, how emotionally skilled you are to begin with depends largely on your childhood and how you learnt to relate to others. So today we're talking about the emotional skills you need as an absolute must in dating to keep your power as a woman in the modern day dating process. That is the part of dating and relationship that is fully in your control and helps put you in the best position where your relationship with that special man will not go wrong because of how you show up. It's a total power reversal. Okay, so let's dive into what those skills are without any hesitation. 1, you become fully expressive of your needs and desires. And there's a way to do this that doesn't make you come across as a diva or someone who's very entitled, right? Expressing your needs from the very beginning of dating a new connection is so important. I remember it in my own dating journey, way before I did any of this work, right? Was that I used to come across as a very easygoing, cool, and flexible woman in the beginning. And then only when intimacy actually built did I start expressing my needs or my wants for a relationship. And obviously, as a result, I experienced relationships that broke earlier, around 3 months, because we didn't want the same things, or because the person I was with experienced a character switch, right? Where I kind of went from being this really easygoing, cool girl he was falling in love with, and then I suddenly became a real human being with complex emotions, and he couldn't handle that because he wasn't ready to be in a relationship with a real human being yet, right? And a real woman with her full spectrum of emotions. You want to be expressing yourself really early on to see where his capacity in relating is and his skills in relating with you, right? I would sometimes also get triggered and initiate conflict in the wrong way because I had suppressed my needs for so long. I just held them all inside, not set boundaries since the beginning, or tolerated my boundaries being pushed, or tolerated partners who punished me with avoidance when I did express my emotions, right? So I learned to keep them in because I just knew what was coming. So all the emotions are building up until there's like a straw that breaks the camel's back moment. Let me know in the comments if you've had one of those, okay? And then it all just lets loose in one massive truth bomb avalanche that invalidates not just your feelings, but it reduces your positioning in the argument. And maybe it even traumatizes the other person. Maybe you end up as an aggressive communicator in conflict, either because you're triggered or because you just don't know how to ask your partner to meet your needs by communicating. Or maybe you fall more on the avoidance side of conflict by stepping on eggshells so not to say the wrong thing, and you go to your emotion cave to process your emotions on your own without the loving support of your partner and communicating anything to your partner at all, and just trying to solve the emotions on your own, and then eventually just getting burnt out from feeling like you're holding all the emotions and you're in the relationship alone. Maybe you never really know where conversations are going because you avoid having those conversations in the first place. So resentment builds up, especially in the conflict moments where you start questioning, why are you even in this relationship and putting yourself through all of these things to begin with, right? Maybe you feel scared to get dumped and abandoned if you ever say what you really feel or what you really want. Sound familiar? I could go on, but ultimately I used to experience these things in my relationships, as do many of my clients, before they begin this work. And it switches up the dating journey in a way where, because you are communicating, the men you date are either meeting your needs from the very beginning or they're not. And that's how you're assessing compatibility. You're not just going with his flow, you are the flow. And then the men who date you know what they're also getting into, and you can screen from all of this whether they can handle a real intimate relationship with you, or if they need a yes girl who goes along with the dynamic that they set up and might not work for you. So skill set number 1 is you become fully expressed. Okay, let's move on to emotional skill set number 2, which is learn to feel what you feel. I've purposely talked about the first 2 skills in the reverse order that they typically happen in, because to understand the importance of this skill, you need to understand the importance of being expressed in dating, so that the relationship that builds is healthy and actually reflects your preferences, needs, and desires. So learning to feel what you feel is actually the step that comes before this. And the best way I can explain this one is through a very quick story. Imagine a 35-year-old woman living in central London. Yes, plot spoiler, this story is about me 6 years ago, who works in the corporate world. Every day she works 17-hour days, 5 days a week, no matter what. Some days she wakes up tired or ill. Doesn't matter, she goes to work. She notices from sitting all day long that she has shoulder and back pain. Doesn't matter, she sits for 17 hours and works anyway. She notices that she only had time to eat 1 meal that day and she's hungry, but the deadline is due, so she works through lunch and dinner. She goes to the gym that day to help her sleep because she's actually been having sleep issues from chronic stress. Even though she has a shoulder and a back issue, she still goes to the gym. So much of adult life is about overriding the feelings in your body to make sure you can be functional and do the things you need to do. It's actually normal, everyone does it. But what happens when this approach gets taken into dating? You completely lose access to your feelings and actually, in fact, your humanity. And as a consequence, you lose access to your intuition, your ability to know what you're feeling, and you lose access to attune to the feelings of the person you're actually dating, because feelings aren't that important, right? Wrong. Maybe in your career world, you can ignore them, and maybe the honest truth is sometimes you have to ignore them, right? Because these are really tough environments. But when your feelings are the core of what matters in a relationship, how can you ignore them? You can't, right? And you are dating to find a meaningful relationship. Your feelings are giving you the data. Your feelings are giving you so much data. And if you aren't in touch with them, that's where a lot of these repeated patterns, or just thinking you've seen the signs, but you can see the signs, but it's the feelings that tell you first, right? So many of you come to me and you say, Lena, I just need to use my intuition in dating, but I don't actually know how to. I'm not even sure if I have intuition anymore. Yes, you do. You absolutely have it. But in order to access it, you need to be able to feel your feelings, and ideally feel them in the moment, right? Feel them when you're in the middle of the date. Feel them when you're in the middle of connecting in a relationship. Feel them in the middle of conflict so that you can feel your feelings. And then going back to point 1, express yourself. If you shut down and suppress yourself, or if you can only access your feelings in the privacy of your bedroom when no one else is around, that's an issue, because that means that being in a relationship with anyone means not having feelings whilst you're around other people, or having feelings but holding them in. I mean, no wonder you're an introvert, because being around other people sucks, because you actually just can't be you. You can't have your full human experience. Let me tell you, I have been the person who can't feel their feelings in the moment. And I have dated people who can't feel their feelings in the moment. And it never works out. Never. Because that's not a relationship. That's two people hyper functioning together. And whilst that can be fun in the beginning because it's lighthearted and the conversation isn't intense and it's easy and you go out and you laugh and there are no conflict, there's no conflict or arguments, and it never gets heavy or deep. When it comes to building an actual relationship with deep intimacy and making big decisions together in life, those two hyper-functioning people don't have the skills. They can't do it, because choosing to be with someone involves losing yourself, and you don't want to do that anymore, right? So it's just not going to happen. So skill number 2 is feeling your feelings so you can communicate, have access to your intuition, and also have access to your emotional intelligence, which you have. It's just it's shut off half the time to attune to what your partner is actually saying and needing also, right? It underlies everything. And you'll find that you'll no longer have this need to go to ChatGPT anymore as your dating and relationship coach. Yes, I know you do that. Okay, so let's move on to skill 3. Know what your attachment pattern is and how to regulate it in dating. By the way, notice how I did not say heal your attachment pattern. I said know it and understand it, right? Understanding how it might be driving certain behaviors in dating, relationship, and as early as on the dating apps, actually. Attachment patterns are about relating to others. So the best way to truly address them is by practicing behavior change in dating and relationship. You're happiest when you're single because you have a high level of emotional control over your life when you are single, right? But what happens when another human being with all their complex stuff comes into your life in the form of an imperfect man? You lose that control and you lose your peace with it, right? And it's not really control. What we're talking about here is regulation. If your attachment pattern is still driving your actions in dating, then of course your relationship feels like a car chase in a low budget cop drama. Nothing about that feels good, right? And I won't go into explaining all of the attachment patterns in this video, but I am in the process of creating a little gift that I will drop somewhere, either in the description or in the comments at some point, that gives you your own personalized guide on what to actually look out for in dating specifically when your attachment pattern is triggered, and to know that it's triggered and what to do instead. And it's a total game changer that stops you from sabotaging new relationships before they even really get off the ground. And that is the number one thing that happens in early relationships and dating. So is that something that would be useful to you? Let me know in the comments, and so I can make sure that I drop that in here for you. Okay, also, here's something no one actually tells you about attachment patterns. Sometimes it's not about finding a stable man, because I don't know where they are. It's about finding a man whose attachment pattern works with yours. For example, 2 fearful avoidance together, a car crash, unless both individuals have done a lot of work on themselves. Ultimately, if you find you're getting triggered a lot on those dating apps, or new connections are ending within the first few dates, or new relationships end in the first few months, and there is a genuine intimacy and connection and it feels good and then something goes wrong, right? Your attachment pattern is likely a large part of where that chaos is coming from and why this is happening. And learning about what attachment patterns look like in dating specifically is also useful to screen what the attachment pattern of your man, of the actual man you're dating is. Do you ever think about that? Do you ever actually try and guess what his attachment pattern is based on his behaviors and whether that's really a compatible match for you? Because there will be some things that don't bother you at all, and there'll be some things you just know from your dating experience it's not that you can't stabilize when you're with someone like that. It's that stabilizing would just take up so much energy in your world, there wouldn't be anything else, any energy left for doing anything else. So you get to have your preferences. Okay, let's move on to the emotional skill 4. Set boundaries that protect your core needs. Boundaries to create safety is obviously important in a relationship, but in most new connections, the first thing to go is protection of actually your core needs, right? So the things you need to feel like you. Maybe that's a certain amount of alone time, healthy boundaries with phone use, hitting the gym each week, going to sleep on time, eating healthily, or only eating foods that make you feel good, not drinking, seeing your friends, honoring certain boundaries with physical intimacy, getting your work done. When you've started a new relationship with someone you really, really like and you're really excited about, you obviously feel so excited. You lean into the connection because you want to get to know them and you spend time together. You're curious to learn about the other person. And maybe in all of that, you get a little carried away, or the other person comes on quite strong in the beginning and you allow yourself to get caught up in their flow, telling yourself, they're just excited about me. Let's just go along with it for now. And you cross a few of your own boundaries and you don't set precedent of what they are with the other person. Maybe the things you were previously committed to don't seem so important to you anymore. And a few months in, you just feel exhausted. You actually feel like you're not even you anymore. You feel lost and maybe even a little resentful of the man you're dating. It's very rarely the big boundaries that get crossed because those would be red flags to you, but it's usually the small things that help you feel replenished and self-connected in life, and that includes dating, right? And it's usually you crossing them rather than someone else by putting these core needs as a nice to have rather than essentials, which is what they really are. You must defend your boundaries and stay in your own flow at all costs, right? When you learn to protect your core needs in dating and new relationships by knowing what they are simply to begin with, you just have to know what they are. And then by setting boundaries, you're able to build a new relationship dynamic without having that horrible feeling of losing yourself in relationship, which is just so icky and unenjoyable. And you really feel like, you get to feel as a new standard, like you're winning in life by having a relationship in a healthy dynamic that builds positively and by feeling like your best self, like you at the same time. Okay, let's move on to emotional skill number 5. Noticing early signs of childhood dynamics repeating in dating or your new relationship. Okay, listen, disclaimer. Just because you see the signs, that doesn't mean this man isn't right for you or your relationship is doomed. What it says is that you are still being the childhood version of yourself somehow. Whether the dynamic is acceptable to you or not is fully your choice. There's no right or wrong in any of this, but it's important to simply be aware of what is happening and then change your behavior accordingly to see if you get different outcomes. When you change your behavior, watch for, does the relationship dynamic shift or does the relationship just stop working? If you do, maybe the relationship feels easier, and if the relationship doesn't adapt, then maybe that's not a good dynamic for you, right? And this could be a whole video in itself, so I'll just quickly run through the most common relationship dynamics that we as women tend to replicate from our childhoods into romantic relationships. Equating love to earning approval. This is the one of the high achiever. Maybe you show up as the cool, nice, low maintenance woman, or you prove your intelligence to him on a first date. Successful women do this all the time. They accidentally confuse a job interview, and I've been one of these women, with a date, and you almost start talking about the things that you've done and your intelligence and like how smart you are, because you're kind of using it as your armor, and you're like, listen, man, don't mess with me. I'm smart. All right, don't mess with me. I'm not like those other women you've dated. And we're doing it to actually like prove our value. And in that, we think we're protecting ourselves, and we're not. If anything, you're revealing your cards very quickly that you feel the need to earn his approval. So it can show up in many silly little small ways that you might not even be aware of, right? So you learnt that love came from being good, impressive, or useful. So in relationships, you just overgive and try to deserve the love. You don't need to do that. Emotional unavailability. So here's another pattern for you. Emotional unavailability feels familiar. You love a man who's either rarely available or inconsistently available, with alternating hot and cold dynamics. I mean, who doesn't love that, right? Literally the worst feeling in the world. And I think we've all been there. And 3 months on, you realize you've secretly been dating your mum or your dad the entire time by replicating the availability dynamics of your childhood. And if that turns you off, I'm glad, and you're welcome. Okay, number 3, hyper-attunement to others, right? And self-abandonment. You had to read the room to stay safe, so now you prioritize your partner's feelings over your own without realizing it. Here's another one. Fear of being too much. Your emotions were dismissed, criticized, made fun of, or overwhelming, right, to caregivers. So you minimize your needs, you soften your voice, or you hold things in, or in time you lose your temper because you just can't take it anymore. Love mixed with anxiety. Affection was inconsistent. Warm one moment, withdrawn the next, so calm, steady love can feel flat and boring and vanilla, and intensity feels like connection. Tell me you have an unstable attachment pattern without telling me you have an unstable attachment pattern. Taking responsibility for others' emotions, right? You were the mediator, the fixer, you were the rescuer, you were the easy child, and now you manage your partner's moods, reactions, and well-being. Avoidance of conflict or explosion in conflict. Conflict was unsafe, either avoided or volatile, right? So you either shut down or you escalate quickly when you're overwhelmed or you feel ignored or dismissed. Chasing emotional clarity. You grew up in ambiguity, mixed signals, unclear expectations, so you seek reassurance, overanalyze, or struggle when things feel undefined. And this is something that gets most of us in very early dating. Over-independence, my successful women. I don't need a man, I don't need anyone. You learned not to rely on others, so you detach, withdraw, or struggle to truly receive love and support, and you so deserve that. Loyalty to dysfunction feels like love. You stayed loyal to difficult dynamics in childhood, so you tolerate behavior, that doesn't meet your standards for longer than you really should, right? Raise your hand if that's you, because it's definitely me, right? So if you're seeing those patterns come up in your dating and relationship world, then you're actually more in control than you realize. Congrats. But in order to have a healthier dynamic, the change has to start with you. If you haven't resonated with anything so far, these next quick two, I already know you're doing. And these small behaviors are actually the most harmful because they're so everyday and likely showing up in multiple areas of your life. So emotional skill number 6, let go of fear and trust yourself. Okay, this next piece of advice is going to sound counterintuitive, but just hear me out for a sec. When have I ever let you down before? So when I first started dating the man I'm currently with, right, I was obsessed with looking out for signs of narcissism because low empathy people and making excuses for them is my pattern from the past. And honestly, I was terrified. And that's what was driving this hypervigilance. Eventually, at the 6-week mark, he turned to me and he said, I get why you're afraid. It's because of your past. And also there were certain behaviors of his that genuinely, they were falling under the textbook definition of love bombing because he was so uncontrollably excited about me when we first started dating. But instead of listening to my intuition, instead, I was getting fixated on applying textbook dating advice and even worse, taking overly self-validating ChatGPT advice that was running and ruining my real life opportunity of dating a man I really thought was special. And I'm glad I came back to myself and was able to let go of even just 10% of that fear to simply just come back to my own intuition. You see, the moment we're in fear energy, we outsource our decisions to either the advice of other people or to the advice of ChatGPT. And even maybe you do it to your therapist or your coach, and you know the answer you get every time from those guys is, okay, no, it's about coaching you to figure out the answer for yourself because you need to be able to do it for yourself because you shouldn't ever outsource your own power, right? So when I suddenly started listening to my own intuition again and that penny dropped and I stopped looking for red flags and being hyper vigilant and I started trusting my own intuition, I started to trust myself again to walk away if the connection was not right for me. And if you resonate with using ChatGPT as your dating coach and getting overly logical textbook dating advice, I highly encourage you to work with a coach because nothing will replace working with a human being who shows you how to create safety for yourself in dating without having to outsource your own power to anyone but yourself. Okay, and emotional skill number 7 is kind of related to trusting yourself, but extrapolated a little bit. Protect your mindset in dating and relationship and stop taking advice from well-meaning family and friends. Look, if you tell someone who loves you, a family member or a friend, your side of the story about how you argued with the man you're dating, the only human reaction in that situation is for them to take your side violently. There is no other outcome of telling them about that last fight with your boyfriend or how the last man you dated was a narcissist. They will believe you. And quite rightly so. They should be on your team. They will love you. They will tell you you're right. And you'll likely stay single. For me personally, and this is a controversial piece of advice, so I do have one caveat with it, right? So please take this advice with the caveat. But personally, I stopped taking advice from my own family and friends in dating. I listened to their advice, but I didn't enact it. Because going back to emotional skill 6, I trusted myself. But there was a time when I was unable, for some reason, to not actually implement their advice. Because if I even so much as heard their advice, I knew I would be subconsciously conditioned into implementing it sooner rather than later because I trusted them over myself and I sabotaged many relationships because of this. What I had to do first is learn to protect my mindset so that I could take advice and trust myself to only implement it if I felt it was right for me, right? So that's kind of the caveat I'm saying, that there will be uncertain or gray areas at times in your new relationship where you're not quite sure if this person is for you. And that doesn't mean there's any decision to be made yet, because people will often give you advice that involves a decision. And then you may prematurely end the connection. If the connection's going to end, it's going to end either now or then. Do you know what I mean? So it means that it's time for you to keep gathering data until you really do know in your own heart what's what. And if you do have a habit of ending relationships quite soon, this could be something to pay attention to in your dating journey to finding a lifetime partnership. There was a time also when I stopped talking about my relationship to family and friends before I had the mindset to trust myself, right? And the caveat is, of course, that if you truly are in an abusive relationship, you may have a predisposition out of a misplaced sense of loyalty to protect the relationship from your family and friends, to keep things to yourself. And obviously in that situation, you want to be saying things to your friends as a safety point and as an accountability point. But can you actually see, this is why self-trust and breaking childhood patterns is so important, because how can you distinguish a relationship that is going through a very hard phase from one that's truly injuring you? And this takes experience, and it also takes a bucket full of self-trust to protect yourself at all times, right? So another more day-to-day scenario, and maybe this one is like easier to apply right now, of protecting your mindset, is that if you are a single woman who is truly looking for a lifetime partner, do not talk about dating or your relationship, especially if it's new, but even if it's not, with friends who just hate men or who have had a very negative view of men for a long time, because bless them, they have had very bad experiences and their feelings are so valid, but that's not the frequency you're on, right? Also be mindful of the content you're watching on social media about men. Every single time you like or watch content that tells you that men are useless and that there are no good men left out there, or that gives you a misplaced idea that every single woman on planet Earth is experiencing exactly what you're experiencing in dating, and you clock it in your subconscious as a truth, and it subconsciously blocks you from calling in a man who is different and healthy for you. I get that this content can sometimes validate your experience and make you feel seen and heard, and I actually think it's really valuable for that, because, you know, at the end of the day, being single is such an issue. The modern dating landscape is such an issue for women, right? So your feelings around it, your experiences around it are so valid, and hearing content from other people can sometimes give you a sense of peace, but know your limits with it, because it's always impacting your mindset around what's possible for you in dating. The sad truth is there's so much content on social media that only gets shown to married women or women who are in happy, healthy relationships or have a positive mindset around men. And you don't get that content because the algorithm knows that you're a single woman because of the other content that you like, and sometimes it just knows you're a single woman from your preferences, and it will push out that hatred content, and it just keeps you stuck, and it reinforces this idea that you are right to stay single because every other option is dangerous. And at the end of the day, if you really want something in your life, it's your responsibility to go ahead and get it for yourself. So don't let anyone tell you that not having it is normal or your inevitable outcome. When you learn the emotional skills required to build a healthy and loving relationship, it's actually not a question of if you get the healthy relationship of your life. It's a question of when. And now that you know what these skills are, if you would like to learn how to do them in your actual dating life so that you can build a healthy relationship with the man of your choosing, there is actually a link in the description below where you can book a coaching inquiry call with me. During that call, you can tell me a little bit about what's going on in your dating and relationship world, whatever feels relevant for you, and we can discuss where your skill gaps are and what your next steps are that you can take in your dating journey to finding a man you might just want life partnership with. Once you know your next steps, if you would like coaching support from me on implementing them, we can also have a talk about what that would look like for you then. I only take on a certain number of women per month, so if that's something you're curious to explore, click the link and book your inquiry call now. As always, I am sending you so much love in your journey to finding healthy and happy relationship with lots of love.